Atalanta showcased a brilliant tactical masterclass against Chelsea. Let's break down exactly how this managed to take place and how Chelsea were beaten even when they had a goal advantage. Atalanta being the black and Chelsea being the white, Atalanta approached the game in a 3-4-3 formation. It seemed as though Atalanta looked to heavily utilize the wide areas in this game, and it led to them winning the game, but more on that later. Atalanta looked to build up in a back 3-3 shape. This build-up shape made it challenging for Chelsea to effectively close down Atalanta's build-up prowess. Let's take a look at how this worked. Atalanta looking to build up in a 3-3 shape. This meant that if Chelsea opted to go man for man, they would then have to commit 6 players into the press, which meant that they would be vulnerable in behind, because the likes of Reece James and Moises Caicedo would have to push upfield and close off Atalanta players. This was then identified by Chelsea, and they instead chose to defend in a 5-4-1 mid-block shape that would attempt to close off central progression and space in behind, especially down the wide areas. However, the build-up of Atalanta was quite enticing for Chelsea not to press them, as they would patiently build up, not rushing ball progression. Chelsea would then feel confident enough to then execute their press, so we did see them press at times. But then Atalanta would go long and hit the spaces in behind Chelsea. This is how Ademola Lookman was able to consistently find space out in the left-hand side. Chelsea were not particularly well executing their rest defense when it came to covering the spaces in behind. Occasionally we would see Atalanta find space in behind Chelsea, but the way Atalanta primarily looked to attack Chelsea was in the wide areas. They would look to overlap both wingbacks in the wide areas, allowing the likes of Ademola Lookman and Charles de Ketelata to attack the half spaces. This is the reason why Chelsea defended in a back 5-4-1 shape. They looked to close off the wide areas at the back, and it did work at times. However, the Chelsea defensive shape would find it hard to well execute this shape. Chelsea would look to overlap Marc Cucurella. This would then cause the Chelsea backline to shuffle across, making into a back 3 at times. We would see Moises Caicedo drop into the backline, or Reece James defending the right fullback area. Both of these two Chelsea players were playing in midfield during this game, so whenever we would see Chelsea push upfield, we would then see the both of them push up. So on the transition, we would then see Atalanta finding space, as Chelsea would have few numbers deep. This wide area attacking play was complemented by their well exploitation of space. Atalanta did manage to dismantle Chelsea for the most part, especially down the right-hand side, as Ademola Lookman and Lorenzo Bernasio would occupy. They would stretch the game horizontally for the Chelsea defense, and this made it difficult for Chelsea to both cover for Marc Cucurella and the space on the opposite side of the pitch. Atalanta were not only well organized defensive, but defensively we would see them diligently manage to cover and will close off the Chelsea attack. Chelsea approached the game in a 4-3-1 formation and would look to play passes, long balls into the wide areas when they were attacking. They would look to then win their 1v1 situations or overload the wide areas, then look for space to either play the cross or cut inside. This is how they managed to score their goal, as Reece James was the extra man out wide and he manages them to well exploit the space. However, Atalanta were able to nullify Chelsea's attack for most of the game, and they managed to do so quite effectively, even when Chelsea would look to drop João Pedro deep in order to find space. This would not work for the most part, as Atalanta were more than happy to allow him to drop deep, knowing that they have well closed off attacking space for Chelsea. This game was a well-executed tactical display for Atalanta, as they managed to overcome Chelsea simply by applying their tactical understanding and following through with their game plan. Meanwhile, Chelsea failed to adapt to the Atalanta attack, and they ended up suffering from it, even though the second Chelsea goal was conceded from a Chelsea mistake. It would be often occurrence for Chelsea to suffer wide attacks from Atalanta and struggled to adapt. Final score: Atalanta 2, Chelsea 1.